Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it a few more minutes until everyone joins the webinar. We'll start in just a few minutes. We'll give everyone another minute to join. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar about Rising to the Giving Challenge. So you may be wondering, what does Sachs, an accounting firm, know about fundraising and giving? But we work with about 400 nonprofits a year, so we hear your successes and we hear your challenges. So we wanted to bring you this webinar today to talk about recent giving studies and reports that have come out. I'm April Kushner. I'm a partner here at the firm in our not-for-profit practice, and I'm joined here today with Adam Holzberg, who's a partner at the firm, and Lauren Frary, who's our Director of Strategic Business Transformation. Adam has been at the firm for several years working in our nonprofit practice. He loves to read articles and be in the know about what's going on in the philanthropy world and in the nonprofit industry. And Lauren has many years of experience as a CEO for nonprofit organizations. So Lauren is our nonprofit insider. So we wanted to bring you this presentation today to talk about recent studies and articles that have come out. We're going to talk about the trends that are coming up, and we also didn't want it to be all doom and gloom, so we also wanted to bring you some strategies and tips that your organization can implement to drive your success in your fundraising and your development efforts. I'm going to hand it off to Adam, and we are going to go through some of the results from recent reports, but these are what we are using. These are the reports that we have been reading. So there was a study from Giving USA, their annual report comparing giving trends in philanthropy from 2021 to 2022. The New Jersey Center for Nonprofits issued their report on trends and outlooks for 2024 and going forward. National Philanthropic Trust reports have a number of different reports out there about donor advised funds. We'll call them DAFs as we go through the presentation. Chronicles of Philanthropy also has a number of articles that have come out, and we've also read and looked at the Stanford Social Innovation Review articles. So I'm going to hand it over to Adam to go over some of the results.
All right, thanks, April. Good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, I drew the short straw today, and I will be delivering some doom and gloom. However, it does get more positive once I stop talking, so just look forward to that. So what we're discussing is there is a challenge in giving, we'll call it right now. Giving declined in 2022. That's just the fourth time in the last 40 years. So 2022 joins the ranks of 1987, when you had the stock market crash then, and then 2008 and 2009 during the financial crisis. So giving declined compared to 21. So 2021 giving was $517 billion. 2022 saw a decline under 500 billion. And that's what we're talking about now, is what's going on with giving. So with giving being down, there's different sectors in nonprofit. When we say nonprofit, it's a very general term and encompasses many types of organizations. So looking at the subsectors, there are some differences on the impact of the decline. So the four largest sectors that saw decline was education, environment and animals, human services, and social services. And then foundations and international affairs actually saw an increase. And this is all adjusted for inflation. So the next slide, it's all laid out here. So you can see where the impact was really greatest. So public society benefit organizations or social service organizations saw the largest decline at 15%, followed by education, environment, animals, and then human services. Other sectors also saw declines, just not as large. I mentioned before, foundations and international affairs, even adjusted for inflation, did see an increase in total giving. International affairs, remember 2022, we had the war in Ukraine start, so that definitely increased giving when it comes to international efforts there. But overall, you can see it's a wide range of declines across the sectors. So the other major concern when we're talking about giving is not just that the dollar amount decrease, is that individual giving has been going down as a percentage. So in 2012, individual giving made up 74% of all giving. So almost 3/4 of all giving was from individuals. And now we fast forward to 2022, and individuals now make up 64% of total giving. So they still are the largest source of giving, but that number is steadily declining. And then with that, with less people are giving, the pool of potential donors is also shrinking, meaning nonprofits are competing with less potential donors out there. So just looking at year-to-year changes on individual giving, once again, this is all adjusted for inflation. 2022 saw the largest decline, negative 13%. And that's even a larger decline compared to the recession, financial crisis in 08-09. So you just see really the impact of this past year. I know a lot of nonprofits, you probably already were feeling this. You didn't need to see the numbers, but now you know that this is a industry-wide issue. It's not just an individual organization or an individual sector. This is across the board. So there were some other periods when, oh, go back one slide. Yep. So there were some other years for inflation adjusted, decline was, lower, but overall it's the recession, and now 2022 with inflation costs, giving definitely had a significant impact there. So next slide. All right, so when we're talking about individual giving, you really can't talk about it without talking about the $230 billion elephant in the room. That's donor advised funds. So what are donor advised funds? So really quickly, donors now can open up charitable accounts with brokerage firms, so a Fidelity or a Vanguard, something along those lines. Put money into the account, and that's considered a charitable donation. They get the tax deduction, but that money is not going to a nonprofit. That money is sitting in a brokerage account where it could appreciate tax-free. It's all earmarked for nonprofits. It's just not necessarily going to the nonprofit right away. Right now, there's no rules for donor advised funds for distributions. So theoretically, someone can open a donor advised fund and then never pay out any of the dollars while still getting the charitable deduction. This is in comparison to private foundations, which does have rules where you're required to distribute at least 5% of the prior year assets. And this is an issue for donor advised funds because more and more giving is going this direction from individuals. You can see, the start of this chart, 2007, 4% of individual giving was to donor advised funds. Fast forward now to 2021, last year of this chart is now at 22%. So of giving, 22% of individual giving is going to not necessarily a nonprofit, but into this brokerage account. So how much we're talking about each year? So 2022, $85.5 billion was contributed to donor advised funds from individuals. So when we're talking about giving as a whole, the beginning I mentioned about 500 billion was 22 giving. 85 billion or so of that was to a donor advised fund, not necessarily to a nonprofit organization. And you can see that's doubled since 2018, when it was about 36, 37 billion, more than doubled in 5 years time span. So this chart is an aggregate of the different brokerage firms, their data. So right now, 2022, we have close to $230 billion sitting on the sidelines that is earmarked for charitable giving, but isn't necessarily in a nonprofit's hands. It's sitting on the sidelines at the moment. And this data does come from the brokerage firms. So there is, I'm not going to say controversy, but maybe some debate on how accurate the numbers are when we're talking about the payout rate and the grants. For instance, for grants, if somebody was switching brokerage firms, so let's say they had a Fidelity account and they want to go to Vanguard, when they switch the money over, they count that as a grant. So it's things like that kind of skew the results. So people are always uneasy with the numbers, I guess. Obviously there's debate over the numbers. But either way, you see the payout rate did decline 21 to 22. Contributions are exceeding grants. And as I mentioned before, 230 billion, that's for charitable giving, is on the sidelines.
Yeah.
All right, so be a little more positive. There are still opportunities. Philanthropy from individuals still leads the way. It still makes up the bulk of source of giving at 64%. So nothing there really has changed. Cultivation and relationship building should continue to be a key activity. And stewardship is more important than ever. It's more important now to really keep your existing donor base, maintaining those donors, and making them lifelong donors. So with that, we're going to make it a lot more positive and pass it along to Lauren.
Right, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with Adam and April. And as Adam said, it's not all doom and gloom. There is some good news. And I'm going to talk about a couple of more trends and also give you a few tips, some really easy things you can do to really bulk up and make a very robust fundraising strategy. But part of that is really understanding who's giving and what they're giving to. And so been dying to say this all day, but we're going to talk about who gives a buck. So we know that there are 5 generations out there in the world, and we have data on 4 of those generations and kind of what their giving capacity is and their giving preferences, and that's what this slide demonstrates. And it just drives home the point that you need to understand with your donor base who you have in your donor base and what their giving preferences are. This will help you be more targeted and strategic with your giving campaigns. So considering the type of organization you are will also tell you the type of folks that are going to give to you, as demonstrated at the bottom of the slide. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about those baby boomers, right? That is the largest cohort of adults in America who are givers, individual givers, right? And our baby boomers have amassed immense wealth. They have appreciated assets at their disposal. They do need some assistance with their legacy plans and their estate plans, most likely because the generation prior didn't have the wealth that they had, and so didn't have the need for estate plans. And so it's really important to have resources available to your donors to help them do that. And then, of course, nonprofits should have a planned giving program, which I'm going to talk to in a later slide. But when we talk about our baby boomers, let's just consider a few things in terms of your strategy, right? So we know that baby boomers tend to prefer direct mail marketing. And so although we're moving towards more tech-savvy methods of fundraising, please remember there's still a place for your direct mail appeals and campaigns. Communication. Our baby boomer generation loves to receive information about their gift, where it went, and how it impacted the organization and the communities that you serve. So just make sure that there is regular communication with those donors. Baby boomers, they do use Facebook and YouTube, and they're more likely than any other generation to go to Google to find an organization to give to. So just make sure that your Google business profile is up and ready to go. And then lastly, and very importantly, provide more than one way to give. So this generation, although more likely to mail a paper check, they also spend money online and will give online. And so what's important here is very inexpensive tip, is make sure that one, you provide more than one way for people to donate, and then make sure that all of your materials have everything that people would need to know to make a donation. And that includes obviously your website, the link to online giving, but also your address to mail a check, and your EIN number. It's really important because donors want to know that EIN number for their tax purposes. So that's a little bit about our baby boomers. So the next slide talks about causes by generation, right? And this graph really demonstrates kind of a shift in important causes by generation. And again, this can just help you target your fundraising efforts and make sure that you're tapping into the people and the generations that prefer your mission. This is not an all-exclusive list, but in general, what we know about the older generations is that they prefer to give to healthcare organizations, religious organizations, and veterans and aging services. While our younger generations really prefer to give to climate change, education, and animal welfare. All right. So why do individuals give? Well, top 3 reasons. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, right? The mission aligns with their personal values, interest in the issue that the nonprofit is trying to solve, and a recognizable or reputable organization, right? Recognizable or reputable does not mean necessarily large, right? So recognizable or reputable organizations are those organizations that are very good at marketing and using all means possible to market and get the good word out about their organization. So even if you are a small nonprofit, you can really get a lot of recognition out there if you use your marketing strategy well. If you look a little further down the chart, I just want to speak to one other point, and that is that nonprofit report rankings, I think it's 19%. Well, what is that? That is those organizations that provide donors with information on charities to donate to. This would be your Charity Navigator or Candid, and they provide rankings in terms of some of the criteria that they look at for organizations, and you can get a gold star or a silver star or some kind of ranking, right? So I know that a lot of the nonprofits I've spoken with, they're concerned about making sure that they're on these sites and they have a good ranking, and I think that that's absolutely a really great idea, and certainly can't hurt you, but it is important to understand that it's not high on the donors list of criteria to give to your organization. This actually points to the need to ensure transparency and accountability, right? So make sure that you are transparent with your financials and your 990, and make sure that you're working to enhance and build the public's trust. Make sure that you get an annual report out, both in paper for our baby boomers and electronically, so that you can address kind of all of these points in one marketing piece. I will take one other kind of detour and talk about the reason that donors do not give a second time, and there's one reason, and that is communication from the nonprofit organization. So donors who have given a gift and received no or little communication back from that nonprofit are more likely to not give a second time. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, we know that individual donors are much more savvy, right? And so what that really means is you just need to continue to educate yourself on giving trends and fundraising strategies. One way to do this and to kind of stay abreast of the trends and the strategies is to subscribe to a magazine or two that really focuses on philanthropy. Philanthropy Today is a really great subscription. The other place you can get some information is join the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And there are state chapters and national chapters, but they are a really good resource in terms of not only the trends in fundraising, but strategies to address those trends. All right, so we're going to talk about some trends. We picked out 5 trends. Certainly there are many, many other trends, but we picked out 5, and our goal today is to talk about the trend, but also give you some easy ways to kind of address the trend and easy ways for you to kind of, again, bulk up your fundraising efforts and strategies. So our first trend is diversifying fundraising strategies, right? So this is what some strategies to address this. Create an annual fundraising plans with goals that can be tracked. And I'm going to actually talk a little bit more in detail about that. Make sure that the leadership and the boards are educated on all of the various gift vehicles out there so that you are ready if one of those gifts comes your way. You don't want to kind of be caught with someone giving you a gift of stock and then not actually know what to do with it, right? So you really need to understand what your options are with these vehicles. If you have a donor that has a DAF, make sure that you talk to them about the opportunity to create a recurring grant for your organization. That kind of puts it on automatic pilot that each year you will get a grant from that donor advised fund. Best practice, make sure you have a gift acceptance policy that talks about not only what you will accept, but what you won't accept. I always give the example, Adam laughs at me all the time, but when I was at an organization, we had someone who wanted to donate a used airplane. And although it seemed like a really nice gift, and that's probably worth a lot of money, the cost and the time and energy it would have taken to manage that donation kind of far outpaced our organization's ability to manage it. So we declined it. So just make sure you write in your gift acceptance policies the things that you just can't accept. And also create an investment policy statement. And I say that to all nonprofits. It doesn't matter your size and how much wealth you have or don't have. You always want to have an investment policy statement. It can be a very easy one, a very simple one, but that way, again, if you are presented with a large gift that should be invested, or the donor is asking you to invest it, then you already have your policy statement in place and you can address it as opposed to trying to scramble last minute. I think that the other thing I want to just go into a little bit more detail is about the first point around a fundraising strategy, right? So it's almost like a small strategic plan for your fundraising or development staff, right? And a fundraising plan provides a roadmap to achieving your fundraising, cultivation, and stewardship goals. And it should outline various activities that you will do to bolster your fundraising and development activities. For instance, a fundraising plan would outline the goals and objectives and activities around events, campaigns, annual appeals, grants, marketing and outreach and education, cultivation and stewardship. You want to collect data, right, on the goals and objectives of those activities so that when you go back and look at the data, you can actually analyze where you were successful and where you had challenges. And that gives you the information you need for the next year to alter and change your strategy for better results. Okay, so investing in technology. So, you know, investing in technology is not a nice thing anymore. You must do it for a number of reasons. Security also being another one, right? But there are a lot of things you can do that, again, don't cost a lot of money. Using QR codes on marketing and fundraising materials is certainly an easy way to achieve that and appeal to younger generations. Expand your presence on social media. And right now the trend is using videos, short 15, 20-second videos. Consider using text messages for outreach. We know that a text message is opened, I think, 98% of the time, whereas an email is opened maybe 54% of the time. Consider, you know, researching and looking into how to use AI to your advantage. Certainly, people are talking about using AI for marketing materials and even grant writing. If you are going to go down that road, though, please make sure that you create an AI use policy for responsible fundraising. I think the only other thing I would say is make sure that you use a donor database. It will give you, again, a lot of data and information so that you can really target, streamline, and make very effective use of your development staff. I will tell you that there are a number of companies now that are creating donor databases that are specifically designed for the smaller nonprofit. So in the past, I know that there were limited options, Donor Perfect, Razor's Edge, Blackbaud. There are many, many other donor databases that are cost effective for the smaller nonprofit. And it's a really good use of your time and data to get into one of those databases. All right, so appealing to individuals. So like Adam and I outlined, right? individuals continue to be the largest donor base that we have. And so you really want to concentrate your time and energy on your individual donors. Certainly a part of your fundraising plan should include cultivation and stewardship, and how you will go about building and sustaining donor relationships. I can tell you that when you do that well, it often leads to your donors opening doors for you. And so then you have your donors being fundraisers for you, and that's a beautiful thing. You know, you also want to make sure that you understand, like I said before, your donor database. So you're cultivating the right people for the right type of gift. So if you have a high worth individual, you want to cultivate them for a planned gift or a gift of estate. So make sure you understand who you have in your donor base and how to cultivate the right gift. Certainly cultivation takes time. It's pure relationship building. It could take many, many years of cultivation before a gift is realized. But when it's done with patience and sensitivity, your cultivation efforts will provide benefits for your organizations for years and maybe even generations to come. All right, trust-based philanthropy. Lots of strategies here. Let me just talk a little bit about, well, what is trust-based philanthropy? It certainly is being talked about a lot. And in my opinion, it's a very, very exciting trend in the world of philanthropy. At its core, trust-based philanthropy shifts the power relationship between the grantor and the grantee to create a more equal relationship built on mutual trust, communication, and desire to support the communities that we live in. So there's some key principles, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. Key principles in trust-based philanthropy are multi-year, unrestricted funding. This allows the grantees the flexibility to use those funds in a manner in which they are most needed. And certainly our nonprofits are the experts on what is needed in the community. Doing the homework. It is now beholden on the donor, right, the grantor, the philanthropist, to figure out, to get to know and educate themselves on the prospective grantees, as opposed to the other way around. Streamlining paperwork. So anyone who's written grants, especially larger grants or government grants, knows that it is a huge burden in terms of not only the application, but then all of the reporting requirements, monthly, quarterly, annual reports. Trust-based philanthropy kind of streamlines that, frees up the nonprofit's time and energy for more mission-focused work. Responsiveness. So open communication is used to build relationships rooted in trust and mutual accountability. So it's not only the fact that the grantee has to respond to the grantor, but the grantor also needs to respond to the grantee. Solicit and act on feedback. So in trust-based philanthropy, the foundations or the grantors are actually looking to the nonprofit to give them feedback on their process to find actual possible areas of improvement in the process and the streamline of the paperwork. And then finally, support beyond the check, right? So the grantors become more responsive and provide also additional non-monetary support to help bolster leadership, capacity, and organizational health. So that's the basic premise around trust-based philanthropy. I can tell you that in New Jersey, some of our larger foundations, our larger giving foundations, are absolutely talking about and trying to figure out how to move towards trust-based philanthropy. If you want some more information about what's going on in New Jersey, certainly check out the New Jersey Grantmakers Council for more information. And they actually also list some of the foundations that are starting to engage in this really exciting new way of being a philanthropist. Okay, next. So digital fundraising and transparency. Some examples of digital fundraising include live streamed events, right? Certainly we We learned that very quickly during the pandemic that you can't have a gala in person, so we had kind of live streamed events or non-gala galas, right? Peer-to-peer fundraising, crowdfunding, donation forms that are on websites and mobile apps. These are all really easy ways and not expensive ways to kind of get into digital fundraising. And some of the benefits of digital fundraising include, improved donor retention, reduced workload, it's a lot easier, increased acquisitioning by broadening your online presence, and certainly enhanced adaptability that allows for quick and instant updates so that you can kind of react to current happenings. So if something happens and you need to shift quickly, you can certainly do that in digital fundraising and transparency. Just a word about transparency. I already mentioned it before when we were talking about the watchdog, the charity navigators. When you use transparency, it allows you to communicate with your donors on the impact of their funds and those you serve for increased opportunities to engage with your donors. So invite prospective donors to come to your organization. Let them see with their own eyes the impact and the wonderful work that you're doing. This creates a culture of transparency, which in turn helps to build trust and cultivate the relationship and hopefully turn that person into a donor. And those are our big trends. Certainly, like I said before, there are many, many other trends out there, but we wanted to kind of pick out 5 and give you some strategies, and I hope that we've done that. So in conclusion, we know economic trends and global conflict continue to impact the philanthropic marketplace. Fundraising is complex, it's ever evolving, it's not going to stop evolving, and it's not going to stop being complex. So you want to start to be prepared and adaptable enough to change your strategy based on what's going on in the market. Your fundraising strategies need to be well defined and supported by data. And despite an overall decline in giving, philanthropy actually remains strong. It's just a matter of strategy. Our donors continue to show great generosity. And I think, the bottom line is keeping your donors informed, close, and well stewarded will increase your success in the future of your fundraising.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Adam. So if you are a CEO of a nonprofit, I hope this gives you some insight into fundraising and philanthropy. If you're a development person, I hope that this gives you some tips and strategies that you can implement to see success in your efforts. Lauren and Adam, we had some questions that come in. I want to go through some of the questions, open it up to anybody who's on the webinar today. You can put them into the questions box. I think it's not the chat box, it's the questions box. We'll go through some of those questions. Some things that came in is if there's any credit for today's course, and so there is no continuing education credit for today's course. The slides will be available for everybody who has registered. The PowerPoint presentation is made into a PDF, so you can access that easily. And then the recording of today's webinar is also going to be available for everyone, so our registrants and our attendees will be able to rewatch this if you want to go back to all of our tips and strategies. So one of the questions that came in, and I believe maybe Lauren or Adam, one of the questions was, what are your thoughts as to the corporate giving landscape? So I know we talked a lot about individuals. What are your thoughts on the corporate giving?
So I think corporate giving is strong and potentially is getting stronger. Certainly, we're all familiar with the kind of term corporate responsibility, right? And that's where corporations and shareholders feel strongly that corporations should invest a small portion of their profit back into the communities, either where they are working or where their employees are coming from. So I think it's strong. I think that the landscape is going to start to change when we start to talk about ESG, which is environmental and social governance. And that does not come without controversy. right? Because most people feel like the whole goal of a corporation is to make a profit. However, increasingly, shareholders and stakeholders are pressuring boards to engage in some kind of environmental and social governance, meaning giving to those causes or those initiatives that would enhance our environment and our social welfare. So I think it's a changing landscape, and it will be interesting to watch.
So where do you see philanthropy in the future, 5 years from now?
Adam, you got a thought about that?
I feel like right now we are in a transition phase, I guess. We're all emerging from the COVID pandemic. And I feel like we're still trying to get, settled down, our feet settled. So I think philanthropy will recover. I don't think this is going to be a downward trend completely. I think it's a transition where we need to reassess how we really go out there and appeal to potential donors. And it may be a shift in some strategies, incorporating newer technologies like AI, like Laura mentioned, and engaging with younger individuals who don't have a history of giving, but are definitely potential donors.
I would absolutely agree with you, Adam. And I think what's going to be interesting to watch then is the younger generations and how those trends that we talked about today start to change shape as we move through the post-pandemic years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for our development people who are development personnel, people who are on the call today, where should they focus their efforts? Should they focus on the individual giving? There's so many tips and strategies and areas of focus. If you're a one-person development team at a nonprofit, where should they focus their efforts?
Yeah, that's a real challenge, right? So for nonprofits that have a small development staff, one person or one person shop, or maybe even it's the CEO that's doing a lot of the fundraising, right? If you look at the data, we know that individuals, right, are the kind of largest giving cohort. So I believe that that is definitely where you want to spend the bulk of your time, cultivating, stewarding, developing those individual relationships. And I think right now, I think it's about marketing and outreach and kind of your social media presence. I think those are two very worthwhile activities. Conversely, I think that unless you are a professional or certified grant writer, that can be a very time-consuming and somewhat frustrating activity. So it may not be the best use of time. But I would definitely say focusing on your individuals and then getting your story out in all ways possible.
Okay. I have another question that came in about when a donor is giving to an auction or at a gala or at a fundraising event, why can a donor not receive a tax deduction for giving to a nonprofit for auction item at a fundraising event, say for a week's stay at a donor's timeshare? I think when it comes to getting a tax deduction, you can give to an individual, to an organization who's a 501c3, and you can receive a tax deduction, but you have to be receiving nothing in return. So that's one of the key items to being able to get a tax deduction. So if an individual is giving to a nonprofit, the nonprofit should make sure to tell within the acknowledgement letter if they are receiving any value for their donation. So if it's a sponsorship, if it's just a donation, or if they're getting anything in return, that's going to be one of the key factors to deciding whether or not an individual can deduct it. But that's also something that the individual should be discussing with their individual tax advisor. So a nonprofit wouldn't be able to tell the individual whether or not it can or cannot be deductible on their personal returns, but a nonprofit can tell the individual what's the value and an acknowledgement letter saying thank you for your donation, or thank you for your sponsorship. The value of what you receive in return is X. So I think that's one of the best advices that I can give there. I don't know if you have something else to add in there, Lauren.
Yeah, so for a nonprofit, that's considered an in-kind donation. It's a non-cash contribution. So it's not as easily identifiable as a simple cash contribution, but you certainly can get a tax deduction for that based on the criteria that April kind of laid out. In-kind donation kind of acts the same way as the cash contribution.
And so I know nonprofits are exploring government grants, private grants, contributions, all different revenue sources that nonprofits come across. So one of the questions that came in is, what's the best nonprofit accounting system to use to account for all of these funds? And so my answer here is, it's the best software is going to be the one that your staff knows how to use. So some are more complicated than others. QuickBooks does a lot of great things for being able to track revenue and expenses by grant or by program, but there are more robust accounting systems out there. And then on top of those accounting systems, as Lauren had suggested, you're going to want to also have a donor database. So that will keep a lot of information there that's not going to be housed in the accounting system. But some of the common ones that we would see would be QuickBooks or Blackbaud and Financial Edge. MIP, I feel like a lot of organizations have gotten away from. I think MIP was a very robust accounting system, maybe not always the most user-friendly. I don't know what you both see with your clients.
Yeah, I was going to say, for example, QuickBooks probably one of the cheapest options out there, but it still has great functionality when tracking grants. For instance, QuickBooks has the class feature where you could essentially put in each of your major programs or grants as its own class and essentially have its own P&L in QuickBooks. So you can easily track what's being spent, how much left over, really make it easy for you.
Yeah, and I would agree with both of you. I can't really opine about accounting software per se, but I would say that I agree with you, April. It's got to be, whatever you're using, people have to be able to access it. The only other thing I've seen is, or that I've talked to nonprofits about, is making sure that you take advantage of all of the training opportunities so that you're using all of the functionality of the software, right? I've seen a number of organizations, they have a great software package and they're using maybe 10% of the functionality. So make sure you take advantage of all of the training opportunities, which are almost always free.
We have another question that came in about DAFs. So given the trend for increased amounts going to DAFs, are there strategies to target gifts from these funds?
So I kind of mentioned this, I'll let you go after me, Adam. So if you know of one of your donors that has a DAF, I think it would be a really great opportunity to sit down with the donor and talk about putting an annual gift on, it's called a recurring grant, right? On automatic pilot with the DAF. That way, the donor doesn't have to remember that it's time to give, right? It just automatically is gifted to the organization. I think that's the smartest thing you can do. We do know that different DAFs have different requirements in terms of, I think it's Fidelity, they require a $25,000 minimum deposit. Some of the other ones don't have a minimum. So you also want to understand kind of the rules from the financial institution that has the DAF.
Yeah, I was going to say, it might be a good idea to put in your materials going out there that you're open to taking funds from donor-advised funds. If you have one, think of us. It's probably the best way to get a message out for people, because with DAFs, you don't know who has a fund really unless you start asking people. It's all private, so when they donate to a nonprofit through a DAF, it's not disclosed as the name of the individual. It's hidden behind, let's say, Fidelity or Vanguard. So it's hard to really know who has one. So the best way is to really put it on your marketing material.
Yeah. I think one of the most fascinating facts that you had is this money that's almost in limbo, right, with the DAFs, where an individual can get the tax deduction for contributing into a DAF, but it kind of sits there in limbo, and there's a little bit of a lag until the money actually gets to a nonprofit. So I think that really changes this whole landscape of individual giving and philanthropy. And so, do we have any strategies for everybody when it comes to increasing individual gifts? So if you had an individual person, how would you approach them into giving more to the organization?
So I think that there's a couple of strategies, right? I think, again, if you're doing cultivation right, you have a relationship with that donor. And oftentimes it's a great opportunity to ask that person out for a cup of coffee, talk about what's going on with your organization, and talk about the need for kind of increasing the fundraising dollars for these reasons, right? Investment in this organization, investment in the community, investment in the people that we serve. And it's really kind of a very simple ask. Would you consider increasing your annual donation by $100, right? So, but you can't really have those conversations unless you've got a solid relationship and or you've been cultivating that person. So I think that's just points to the importance of cultivation, because if you have done that work, it's really easy to say, this is why we need increased fundraising, and we're looking to you to be a part of that. And of course, and give the reasons. We're expanding, we're growing, we're serving more people. And I would say 9 times out of 10, your donor is going to say yes, and they're not going to say yes unless you ask.
Mm-hmm. True, absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. There was one more question that came in that I want to make sure we get to. I know we allotted until 3 o'clock today. We don't need to keep you until 3 o'clock, but we want to make sure that we answer your questions today. I think we have one more in here about DAFs again. So what about ways to get in front of entities that house DAFs so they can know your organization if their clients are asking for recommendations of organizations that work on particular issues or causes? Is that an option?
Yeah, so, and Adam, again, I don't know if you want to jump in, but I think that, you want to, again, make sure that you're getting your message out far and wide with all possible media opportunities. But the other thing you can do is you can actually find the DAF officer at the financial institution and target that person to send your marketing materials and ask for a meeting. Ask for a meeting and say, hey, we are a nonprofit in the community. We're interested in receiving DAF grants. And let me tell you about what we do in the community so that if you have an investor who's not quite sure, you can send them our way for an introduction. So I would say be bold and put your information out there and ask to speak to the DAF officers at the financial institution. Adam, would you add anything to that?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, the worst they'll say is no, but definitely you should ask.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Adam. I think we've covered everyone's questions today. Just to recap, the trends that we're seeing, right, is that there is still giving. Individuals are still the largest percentage of who is giving to nonprofits. There are a lot of tips and strategies out there to help your organization be successful in their development efforts. This presentation will be available for everyone. I believe it is emailed out. You will be able to get the slides. You will be able to get the recorded webinar, and it does go up on our website and our SACS resources. A little bit real quick about what's coming up at SACS. We do an annual Founders Award every year where we give $20,000 to a nonprofit organization. Unrestricted, you can use it for whatever you want. The application is coming out in April and they are due to be submitted in July. It is a video and we ask you to answer a few questions on a given theme. So we pick a different theme each year that'll apply to the nonprofits. So be on the lookout for our application for Founders Award. And if you want to be put on our list to make sure you receive an application, absolutely let us know. You can reach out to me individually. You could also reach out to our Founders Award email address at so I believe it is foundersaward@sacsllp.com, and be on the lookout for that application coming out. Saks is putting together a nonprofit fundamentals video series, so that is coming soon. You'll see my face, Adam's, and Lauren's in those videos. They are short 5-minute video clips about nonprofit fundamental topics, so things about revenue recognition for nonprofits, a little bit about functional expenses. We wanted to bring that information to you in a short, not a 1-hour webinar, so short 5-minute video clips for you. We are doing a live in-person nonprofit seminar in New York and New Jersey in June, so be on the lookout for that. More materials are available in our nonprofit resource center on the Saks website. So feel free to reach out to us anytime if you have questions, and thank you for joining us today.